I had just moved to the city a few months ago for my first real job, graphic designer for a mid-sized ad agency. Nothing crazy glamorous, but enough to get me my own tiny apartment downtown. I was still in that phase of exploring the neighborhood, trying to make it feel like home. There was this one building down the block, though, always caught my eye. Totally run down, boarded up windows on the lower floors. No lights inside. Graffiti everywhere. Some nights when I'd walk past it after grabbing late-night tacos or hitting the 7-Eleven, I saw movement through the upper windows. Probably just rats, right? It had been an apartment complex once, a long time ago. I asked around, and the only story I got was that there was a fire on the top floor years ago, and the owner just abandoned the whole thing, left it to rot. It gave off serious "don't go in there" vibes, but of course, that's exactly why my buddy Max suggested we check it out. It was a Friday night, and we were just sitting around my place eating garbage food and half watching some horror movie when he floated the idea. "Come on, dude," he said. "You can't live next to an actual haunted building and never step inside." I knew it was dumb. I knew we could get arrested or worse. But we were buzzed on cheap beer and adrenaline. So we grabbed our flashlights, phones, honestly, and headed down the block. The street was dead quiet, just the occasional rumble of a passing bus or a distant siren. We found a loose panel on the side entrance and squeezed through. Inside, the air hit me like a wall. Thick, dusty, and cold. Way colder than it was outside. The first floor was a mess. Chunks of ceiling missing, mold creeping up the walls, broken furniture here and there. We joked around at first, shining our lights on random junk, daring each other to go into rooms. Then we heard it. Somewhere upstairs, footsteps. Not like a raccoon scurrying around. Heavy, deliberate footsteps. Max froze, flashlight beam shaking. "Probably another dumbass like us," he whispered. But he didn't sound convinced. I wasn't either. We should have left. We really should have just turned around and gotten out. But something pulled us deeper inside. Curiosity? Stupidity? Probably both. We found the main stairwell. Most of the railing was ripped out, and the steps looked sketchy as hell. As we climbed, each creak underfoot echoed through the building, announcing exactly where we were. At the second floor landing, we noticed something. Every door down the hallway was wide open, except one. The last door on the right. It was closed, and there was this weird symbol spray-painted across it in black. Looked kind of like a star, but messed up, like a kid had tried to draw it from memory. "Bro, that's like some Blair Witch shit," Max muttered. That's when we heard it again. This time, right behind that door. A slow, dragging noise. Something, or someone, was in there. I whispered, "Let's bounce." But Max just stood there, locked in place like a deer in headlights. I grabbed his sleeve and tugged hard. "Dude, now." We started backing away, but not fast enough. The doorknob jiggled. Scrape, 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 like long nails or something metal dragging across the inside of the door. We didn't wait to find out what it was. We bolted back down the stairs, almost slipping on the broken steps, flashlights flailing everywhere. We made it back to the first floor, practically sprinting for the exit, and that's when we heard it. A new noise. A voice. It wasn't yelling. It wasn't even loud. It was this slow, wet whisper, coming from somewhere down the hall. "Don't leave yet." I didn't even look back. I just shoved the panel open and practically threw myself outside. Max was right behind me, gasping for air like he'd just run a marathon. We didn't say a word. We just kept walking, fast, back toward my building. Only once we were inside, doors locked and deadbolted, did we finally speak. Max's face was pale. He wiped his forehead with his sleeve and said, "Man, there was someone in there." I nodded, heart still pounding. Yeah, but it wasn't just someone. He looked at me, confused. I hesitated, wondering if I should even say it out loud. But screw it. When we got to the second floor, I saw something move past the open doors. Like a shadow, but it wasn't shaped right. It was too tall, and it bent weird at the joints. It didn't walk like a person. Max just stared at me. Neither of us knew what to say after that. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. Every little creak in my apartment had me on edge. I pulled up Google Maps, zoomed in on that abandoned building. Nothing new. Same boarded up windows. But in the street view photo from a year ago, at the second floor window, there was something there. Something tall, leaning just out of sight. Was it watching even then? Or was it still waiting for someone dumb enough to come back? I moved to Boston a year ago for school, and even though it's a huge city, parts of it still have this weird, abandoned vibe. You know what I mean? The crumbling back alleys, the old train stations no one uses anymore. Stuff the city just forgot about. My roommate, Trevor, was the one who first told me about the Hollow. That's what people called it. This underground tunnel system that used to be part of the original subway. It got sealed off decades ago after some big accident. Of course, there were all kinds of stories floating around about it. People getting lost, weird noises, missing pets. Typical urban legend stuff. We were a little drunk after a night out when Trevor dared me to go check it out. I laughed it off at first. But the more we joked about it, the more the idea started to sound like an actual plan. "We'll just poke around," he said, grinning. "In and out. I'll even film it for clout." By the time we grabbed flashlights and jackets, it was past 2 a.m. The streets were dead, just the low hum of distant traffic. We hopped a rusted fence behind an abandoned train depot, slid through a gap in the concrete, and found ourselves standing at the entrance to a dark, gaping tunnel. The Hollow. Trevor was buzzing with excitement, pulling out his phone to record. I felt that little kick of adrenaline, too, the kind you get right before you do something you know is stupid. Inside, it was colder than it had any right to be. Our breath misted in the beams of our flashlights. The tunnel stretched ahead into blackness, the tracks long since ripped up, the walls tagged with layer after layer of graffiti. "Come on, dude," Trevor whispered. "Let's go find some ghosts." We laughed and kept walking, the sound of our footsteps bouncing off the filthy tile walls. For the first 10 minutes, it was exactly what you'd expect. Rats. Scurrying in the dark, puddles that smelled like sewage, trash everywhere. Trevor kept pretending to see things, jumping around like an idiot. But then, after we rounded a curve deep underground, the air shifted. There was something up ahead, something that looked like a light, a faint, flickering glow, orange and unnatural, just barely bleeding into the tunnel from an adjoining side passage. Trevor killed his phone light without thinking. The two of us just stood there, staring at the glow, our laughter dying in our throats. "You seen that?" he whispered. I nodded slowly, my heart thudding in my ears. Without saying anything else, we crept toward it, trying to stay as quiet as we could. As we got closer, the sound of voices started to drift toward us, low, rhythmic chanting. I couldn't make out the words, but it definitely wasn't English. It was old, guttural, like something scraped out of a nightmare. We reached the mouth of the side tunnel and peeked around the corner, and what we saw made my blood run cold. In the center of the passage, maybe 20 or 30 feet ahead, a group of people stood in a loose circle. They all wore dark, hooded cloaks, their faces hidden. Some held candles. Others had old, heavy books or weird-looking relics that glinted in the shaky light. They didn't move. They just stood there, chanting in that guttural language, swaying slightly like they were hypnotized. I pulled back immediately, bumping into Trevor. He dropped his phone with a clatter that felt way too loud in the stillness. The chanting stopped. We both froze, our bodies practically vibrating with fear. Then, one of the figures turned. His hood slipped back just a little, and even in the weak candlelight, I could tell something was wrong with his face. The skin looked wrong. Puffy, stretched too tight, the mouth too wide. He stared directly at us. I didn't think. I just grabbed Trevor by the jacket and yanked him backward. We ran blindly down the tunnel, our flashlights bouncing, the walls closing in. I heard movement behind us, fast, heavy footsteps, slamming against the cracked concrete. "They're coming," Trevor gasped. We sprinted back the way we came, tripping over rubble and loose bricks until the tunnel forked. I yanked Trevor down a side passage, praying it would lead somewhere. It didn't. The corridor ended in a huge metal door sealed shut with chains and a heavy lock. We were trapped. Behind us, the chanting started again. But this time it was faster, louder, angry. Flashlights jerked wildly as the first figure came into view at the mouth of the hallway. More followed, their shadows stretching long and wild on the walls. "Dude, we gotta fight or something," Trevor hissed, grabbing a broken pipe off the ground. I didn't think a pipe was going to do much against a mob of freaks, but I grabbed a chunk of rebar anyway. My hands were slick with sweat, heart hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. The first cloaked figure stepped closer. His candle illuminated more of his face, and what I saw didn't look human. His eyes were too small, too deep set, and his skin had a slick, waxy shine, like something that had been sitting in formaldehyde too long. He raised his free hand and pointed straight at us. That was it. That was the moment I knew we had to get out or we weren't going to get out at all. Trevor was faster than me, always had been. Before I could even yell, he charged the nearest figure, swinging the pipe like a baseball bat. It connected with a sickening crack, and the cloak guy dropped his candle, stumbling back. It was enough. We shoved through the small gap in their ranks, pushing and elbowing, slipping on the wet floor. Trevor grabbed my arm, yanking me along. We bolted back down the main tunnel, blind with terror, not even looking behind us anymore. The whole time, I swear I could feel them chasing us, just a few steps behind. When we finally spotted the rusted hole we'd crawled through to get in, it felt like salvation. We dove through it head first, scraping our hands and knees on the broken concrete. Outside, the night air was freezing but clean, and it burned my lungs in the best way possible. We didn't stop running until we hit the main road, collapsing against a bus stop sign, gasping for breath. Trevor was laughing in this wild, breathless way that made me think he was about 5 seconds from passing out. I couldn't even smile. I just kept staring back toward the fence, half expecting those cloaked figures to come pouring out after us. But no one did. The city was still silent, still empty, like nothing had ever happened. Later, we joked about it, called it the Midnight Creep Club or the Underground Cosplayers. But late at night, lying in my bed, I couldn't help thinking about the faces under those hoods. Not just human faces, something older, something wrong. And sometimes, when I walk past the old train depot on my way to class, I swear I hear that low, throaty chanting rising up from the sewers, waiting for someone else to wander in. It was a stupid idea. I'll be the first to admit it. I'm Nate, 24, recently graduated, working a mind-numbing job at a local newspaper. My friends Matt and Corey still had the whole college lifestyle going, and every weekend they'd rope me into something questionable to keep me from going full corporate zombie. This time, it was an abandoned school on the edge of town. Briarcliff Elementary, shut down in the early 2000s after a bunch of health code violations and rumors of weird stuff happening to the kids. Nobody ever tore it down, though. It just sat there, rotting. We were hanging out at Corey's place Friday night. crushing beers and scrolling Reddit when he brought it up. Bro, it's just a big old building. We sneak in, take some dumb pics, and dip. Classic urban exploration. I wasn't thrilled, but Matt was already pulling up maps and planning a route. The property was fenced off, but Corey claimed there was a hole in the fence around back. Easy in, easy out, he said. It was cold that night. Dry autumn air that smelled like leaves and exhaust. We parked a couple streets over and hiked through some overgrown woods, flashlights in hand. Corey led us straight to the fence, and sure enough, a section had been peeled back like someone had clawed their way in. The building loomed in front of us, bigger than I expected. 2 stories, boarded-up windows, giant double doors chained shut, paint peeled in long strips down the walls. Matt found an open side door half off its hinges. We squeezed inside, kicking up dust and that gross, stagnant air smell you always get in abandoned places. The place was trashed. Broken lockers, smashed desks, old papers littering the floors. The walls were tagged with graffiti, but not the usual colorful stuff you see downtown. Here it was weird. Symbols and scrawled words I didn't recognize. At first, it was kind of fun. We joked around, took goofy photos, dared each other to check out the creepy bathrooms. The worst part was the dead silence, broken only by the crunch of debris under our feet. Then Corey found the stairs to the basement. Matt and I hesitated. I don't know why exactly. The whole building felt wrong, but the basement practically radiated it. Corey laughed. Don't be babies. And like idiots, we followed him down. The basement smelled worse than the rest of the school. Mold, rotting wood, something metallic like blood. Our flashlights barely cut through the darkness. We moved slow, stepping over collapsed beams and busted furniture. Down there the rooms were different. Smaller, cramped. Some still had old projectors and weird little chairs, like kids had been packed into underground classrooms. We found a door marked storage, half open. Inside, the walls were lined with dusty shelves. In the middle of the room was a circle of melted candles and some old stained cloth draped across a pile of who knew what. Nope, I said immediately. I'm out. Matt agreed, but Corey grinned like an idiot and started poking around. He pulled the cloth aside and instantly gagged. I caught a glimpse. Dead animal bones. Maybe a dog? It had been there a long time, long enough that it barely looked real anymore. Corey swore and backed off. We got out of that room fast, none of us laughing anymore. As we stumbled back into the hallway, I heard something. A soft, scraping sound, way off down the hall, like nails dragging along tile. I froze. Did you hear that? Matt nodded, his face pale. Corey waved it off. Probably rats. But it didn't sound like rats. It sounded deliberate. We picked up the pace, heading back toward the stairs. The scraping grew louder. Right as we reached the foot of the stairs, my flashlight flickered. For half a second, the hallway behind us went dark. Then it snapped back on, and in that brief moment, I swear I saw something standing at the end of the hall. Tall, arms too long, almost brushing the floor. Its face hidden in the shadows. I didn't say a word. I just shoved Corey up the stairs and ran after him. Back on the first floor, we booked it toward the side exit. My heart hammered so loud it drowned out everything else. We burst into a hallway we hadn't come through before, one lined with rows of classrooms on either side. That's when we heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, dragging footsteps following us. Not running. Like it knew we couldn't outrun it forever. Corey yanked open a classroom door, and we ducked inside, killing our flashlights. We pressed against the wall, holding our breath. For a few moments, all I could hear was my own heartbeat. Then, faintly, the door to the hallway creaked open. Something moved into the hallway. Through the crack in the classroom door, I saw a shadow pass by. It paused right outside. I squeezed my eyes shut, prayed it would keep moving. Then something sharp scraped against the door. Not like knocking, more like claws lightly dragging across the wood. Matt flinched so hard he bumped a desk. The scraping stopped. I opened my eyes just in time to see the doorknob slowly start to turn. Panic hit me like a truck. I grabbed Corey's arm and yanked him toward the other side of the room where the windows were. They were boarded up, but not well. Matt was already pulling at the boards. They creaked loudly, the noise echoing down the hall. No choice now. We ripped the boards loose and squeezed through, tearing our jackets on the splintered wood. Outside, the air was freezing, the dark street empty. We didn't stop. We ran full tilt across the parking lot, through the hole in the fence, and didn't slow down until we collapsed behind Corey's car, panting and coughing. I looked back at the school. For a second, I thought I saw something in the window we broke out of. A shape, watching us. But when I blinked, it was gone. Nobody said a word. We just piled into the car, locked the doors, and peeled out of there like the place was on fire. It wasn't until we were halfway back to town that Corey finally spoke. "You saw it too, right?" he asked quietly. I didn't answer. None of us did. Because deep down, we all knew the truth. It wasn't a rat. It wasn't a prank. Something else was in that building. Something that never left when the school closed down. And something that didn't want us to leave either.
If these stories sent a chill down your spine, go ahead and tap that like button and subscribe for more eerie tales. What would you do if you were caught in one of these unsettling situations? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd really love to hear what's on your mind. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.